Hey guys, hold on, let me get my little picture. Because you guys don't want to see me now, that I can promise. I am like true bedhead. So you guys get a little picture. I don't know, I might go on camera after some coffee. I mean, I'm showered. Well, I took a shower last night, but... Alright. I'm just tired. Good morning, everyone. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. And, alright, so before today's trial starts, I did want to go over a couple things. I, like many others, probably had preconceived notions coming into this live. I mean, coming into this trial, not into the live, into the trial. And I honestly and truly thought that Johnny Depp was, going to get away with something that he shouldn't be getting away with. And that just because he's a, hot celebrity, then, thanks, Vanessa, then, he's going to get let off and, he's going to get away with being an abuser. And I think a lot of people had that same preconceived notion that I had. The reality is, after watching what I did, now again, I haven't watched the beginning of the trial, but after watching what I did yesterday and seeing how much she recorded, what that tells me is that she was setting him up from the beginning. Nobody records that much unless you're already in a custody fight or a divorce or something. But she got him at his most vulnerable moments. And for you to calculate that you're actually going to record somebody like that, that's preconceived. So how I went into this with this preconceived notion about him, well, I'm slowly realizing that I think I was wrong. And that she really is the abuser. She calculated this. She got him in his most vulnerable moments and at his worst moments. And like he even said yesterday, like, why did she record that? And he's right. So that just tells me that he really was set up. Now, does that eliminate his role in the verbal and psychological abuse? No, it doesn't. I said this yesterday and I cannot make this any clearer. People do not think that saying, fuck you, cunt, or I fucking love you, cunt, is abuse. Well, according to the law, it is. According to the law, or the way other people see it, because remember, a reasonable thought or a reasonable jury or I'm kind of putting this in criminal terms, but reasonable doubt is based on other people's opinions. If a normal person would think that, they would also doubt that. It's the same kind of thing. I know I just woke up, so I'm like, my thoughts are scattered, but, Good
morning. What's up? Welcome. Thank you guys for stopping by.
I got Ikmel on.
And today...
What's up, Ikmel? So, a lot of people seem to think that is okay, but technically it's not okay. Technically, when you tell someone, hey, what's up, bitch? That's actually abuse in the eyes of the law. And many, many people will think that that's abuse in the eyes of the law. So it's just something you want to keep an eye on. You want to be aware of. So, okay. It looks like it's starting, so let me find my stream that I'm going to use. Where are we here? Look at that tie. It's like Willy Wonka tie. JD's hard and not acceptable. Judge looks as tired as me. See how short he is? That is not someone who's 5'10". Trust me. Yep.
Good morning, Your Honor. Plaintiff calls Tara Roberts.
All right. Let's see if we can get her on here. Hi, Miss Roberts, can you hear me?
The guy sitting next to Johnny looks like Beaker.
Miss Roberts? I can see her. Excuse me?
I should have been a judge.
Yeah, you can bring him in. See if she's on mute or not.
Look, it's Beaker. This guy can't make a lot of money. There's just no way.
She's right. Oh. Can you hear me, Miss Roberts?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Can you raise your right hand for me? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth under penalty of law?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Damn, no Bible swearing or nothing. Maybe Capone.
We can't see her on the big screen.
Oh my God, look at that guy. She does, baby boss. Good point. Look at this dude. How does this guy make a lot of money? Tell me. Nah, the stream seems fine. It's Beaker. What's up, boo-boo?
All right. Go ahead and ask your question. Go ahead. It's the best we're going to do right now.
Okay. Good
Oh my
morning.
God, Capone, you're right.
For the record.
Tarly.
It's Lindsay.
Miss Roberts, how do you know Johnny Depp?
I manage his island in the Exuma Keys in the Bahamas for the past 15 years.
Miss Roberts, where do you live?
I live on the island, and I have a home in Nassau and in Long Island, Bahamas, which I try to get to as frequently as possible.
Can you please describe Mr. Depp's private island generally?
My duties on the private island would be to maintain the island, the buildings, the houses, logistics, not included or limited to provisioning fuel, gas, groceries, just day-to-day operations, staff, and kind of like an estate just in the middle of nowhere.
Okay. Your Honor, I would like to pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 49, which has previously been submitted into evidence.
Okay.
And Mr. Gibson, if you could play this, and Your Honor, if we could publish this to the jury. Thank you. We can take that down. Ms. Roberts, do you recognize what is shown in that video?
Yes, that's Johnny's house on the island.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gibson, can you please pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 348? And this hasn't been submitted into evidence yet, so let's first just play that for Ms. Roberts.
All right.
Ms. Roberts, do you recognize what is shown in that video?
Yeah, that's his house and closet area.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd like to, plaintiff moves to admit this into evidence.
All right, 348 in evidence. Do you wish to have it published?
Yes, can we please publish
Okay.
that to the jury? And Mr. Gibson, once it's published, if we could play that again. And Ms. Roberts, what is that doorway with the beads that was just shown in that video?
That's the entrance to the closet
What the hell's the point of all this? I don't get it.
in his house.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts, I believe you mentioned that you manage staff on the island. How many people work with you on the island?
Myself and three others is Jason Major, goes by CJ, Stephen Farrow, and Rico Major.
I want to be on an island.
Is this, I believe the witness is not being shown to the jury right now on their screens. Thank you.
The witness.
I know, right? Like, he could afford a much bigger home.
Ms. Roberts, how are you compensated for your work on the island?
I receive a monthly salary.
Other than this monthly salary, what other sources of income do you have?
I get dividends and rental from family properties and businesses that we have.
Since you've been working for Mr. Depp, how often have you seen him?
On average, 2-3 times a year. Sometimes it was longer. More
I wish
business.
doohickey.
Sometimes I didn't see him for a period of time, depending on what his schedule was or what was happening on the island.
And how would you describe your interactions with Mr. Depp?
The island was a very family atmosphere. Dinners together. He was very social, funny, humorous, very kind with all of us, and very outgoing. Enjoyed working with him and for him.
When you first started working on Mr. Depp's island, who would come down to the island?
At the beginning, it was Vanessa and the children.
Objection.
When he started dating
Relevance.
Amber.
All right, hold on a minute, ma'am. Objection.
Relevance.
It goes to just Ms. Roberts' knowledge of who came down to the island
We
with Mr.
can
Depp.
move forward. Next question.
Okay. Ms. Roberts, Ms. Roberts, are you aware if Mr. Depp brought, or how often did Mr. Depp bring guests with him to the island?
He had guests. He would bring Amber and Amber with her friends, and also I had on one of the occasions I had Paul Bettany and his wife and his children here on one of the trips.
And when did the Bettnys come down to the island?
Sometime in the summer of July 2013.
What happened when the Bettnys came down?
It was a normal trip. We had an incident where I was asked to have Amber leave the island. I scheduled a flight for her to leave to go to Florida that morning, and then that afternoon I was told to bring her back, and I arranged for a flight for her to come back that afternoon to the island.
When did you first meet Ms. Heard?
I believe it was shortly after they started dating.
What was your impression of Ms. Heard when you first met her?
Objection.
Oh, they were very much in love.
Relevance. I'll withdraw.
Okay, go ahead. Next question.
Go ahead. I think Ms. Berthoff withdrew her objection.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so Ms. Roberts, you can answer. What was your impression of Ms. Heard when you first met her?
Oh, they were very nice, a couple in love. She cooked for him, cleaned up, they took care of each other. They were a very happy couple.
When, if at all, did that change?
With each visit, it changed. More of it was more not like an island life anymore. It was more of wines and more requests, simple things, toiletries, to have things here in place before they came or she came as well. So it, luggage changed. We got more and more luggage. Just things evolved and kind of mushroomed a bit.
How often would you see Ms. Heard on the island when she was in a relationship with Mr. Depp?
I would, on average, every day, taking meals, cleaning houses, sometimes more.
And how often would Ms. Heard come down to the island?
At the beginning, probably the same 2 or 3 times a year, sometimes 3 times with her friends and family and Johnny.
During your interactions with Ms. Heard, what, if any, changes did you observe of Ms. Heard?
The taking care of the cooking the meals, we then had a chef come to cook. It was more of a formal island with chefs and housekeepers and things like that. Changed yeah, pretty much that.
Ms. Roberts, were you on the island in August 2014 for Mr. Depp's detox?
Yes, I was.
Who else was on the island?
I flew to Nassau and met Johnny, Amber, and Deb. I flew them back to the island, and then a couple of...
Ms. Roberts, I believe you froze there for a second. I heard you say Johnny, Amber, and Deb, and then you were cut off for a second.
A couple of days later, Dr. Kipper arrived.
What do you recall about that time that Mr. Depp came down to the island in August 2014?
That he was going to be here. They were going to be here for an extended period of time, at least a month or longer. And so we provisioned for a month for the trip. And after about a week or 2, they left.
Where was Mr. Depp staying for the detox?
In his house.
Is that the same house that was just shown in those videos earlier?
Yes, it was.
How often would you see Mr. Depp when he was on the island for the detox?
I was every day, but not face to face, just from delivering replenishing the house, delivering supplies, waters, and things like that, linens, and changing things out. So glimpsing him, not a conversation as it used to be.
How was Mr. Depp when you saw him?
He was always asleep on the couch.
While Ms. Heard was on the island for the detox, what, if any, injuries did you observe on Ms. Heard?
I didn't see anything.
After Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard left the island, what happened next?
We would go into the house and break it down, empty out the refrigerators, change the linens, collect the laundry, straighten the house back up again.
After they left, what, if any, property damage did you observe?
There wasn't any.
Ms. Roberts, to what extent were you involved in Mr. Depp and Mrs. Heard's wedding in February 2015 on the island?
Pretty much all aspects of it, logistics, work permits, getting things set up onto the island, to the island, staff, provisions, building of the tents and organizing transportation of guests to and from the island.
When did you first hear that Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard were getting married on the island?
Objection calls for hearsay and relevance.
What's the relevance of when she heard?
I can move on.
Okay, next question.
What communications, if any, did you have with Ms. Heard about the wedding?
We were given information on a schedule to better help me schedule and the provisioning of what would be on the island, beverages and food and things like that. We were given a schedule for daily things were going to happen each day, what time foods were, when people were coming in, how many people would be at meals, just so I had a better idea of planning of what was happening. It was detailed. It was what was happening each day and then it was the rehearsal night, and there would be, we had scheduled, like, would be dinner, dancing, drugs, music, and then the wedding. We were very conscious about doing the wedding. The next day we were doing the wedding, the ceremony, and we were specific on time. Privacy was very important. We were very careful of people taking pictures. I think everybody was given disposable cameras and asked not to take pictures. I was concerned about that also, but we were doing the ceremony at sunset, so there really wouldn't be issue with what paparazzi people and things like that. And shortly when the ceremony was about to happen, it actually happened earlier than it was scheduled. The bridal party and Amber showed up early, and we were still scrambling for flowers and setting up and getting beverages and snacks down there. And there was a plane circling overhead, and it would just kept on circling and circling and taking pictures, and the ceremony proceeded earlier than was scheduled.
Did you observe Mr. Depp drinking alcohol at the wedding?
Objection leading.
All right, I'll sustain the objection.
Okay. Ms. Roberts, as part of the provisioning for the wedding, did you order alcohol for the wedding?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
Okay. Ms. Roberts, what did you order for the wedding in February 2015?
I was given a list of food. I was given a list of beverages for wines, champagnes. I was asked to have Dr. Pepper and sugar-free Red Bull here, because at that time that was what Mr. Depp or Johnny was drinking, was Dr. Pepper and sugar-free Red Bull.
Okay. Did you observe Ms. Heard drinking alcohol at the wedding?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
Who did you observe drinking alcohol at the wedding?
Pretty much everybody was drinking and doing shots and celebrating. It was a party.
Ms. Roberts, I'd like to discuss with you when Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard were on the island in December 2015. Who came down to the island with them?
I flew to Nassau to meet them, which is what I normally do. I meet himself, Johnny, and whoever comes to the island, I fly to Nassau to meet them just to make sure that the transition is smooth with customs and immigration. So I flew to Nassau and I met Johnny, Amber, his children, and a friend of the children, and loaded the luggage onto the caravan plane, and we boarded the plane and came to the island. And a couple days into the trip, Alice and Greg and Alice's 3 children and a nanny came to the island as well.
Who are Alice and Greg?
Alice is a clothes designer, and Greg was her partner, and I believe he's a photographer.
When did you first interact with Ms. Heard when she came to the island in December 2015?
At the airport when I flew to Nassau to meet everybody. Usually when they come down off the plane, you know, there's hugs and kisses and chatting for a couple minutes while the luggage is transferred.
How close were you to Ms. Heard?
Close, hug, kiss, you know, how are you, talk, same with everybody. So face to face, cheek to cheek.
What, if any, makeup did you observe Ms. Heard wearing when you first interacted with her?
I don't recall if she was or was not wearing makeup. If she wore makeup, it was very natural. I don't think often she wore makeup on the island. I don't recall her wearing makeup.
What, if any, injuries did you notice on Ms. Heard?
I didn't notice any.
Ms. Roberts, you mentioned that Gregory, a photographer, came to the island during that time. How often did you observe Gregory on the island?
I interacted every day because meals went down and changing the sheets and cleaning the room. So I see everybody every day there.
And when you saw him, what was he doing? They were doing. There was a photo shoot on the island. Amber was wearing Amber was wearing Alice's clothes, and they were doing a photo shoot on the beach. And Greg was taking the pictures. Okay. What, if anything, do you remember about that particular time that Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard came down to the island?
There was a incident between Johnny and Amber here during that trip.
Okay, can you please describe that incident?
On the evening, we kind of called it a night. Dinner was finished. We wrapped everything up down here at the staff area in the kitchen. Myself and CJ came to the office later on that evening, and Johnny was in the office up here, and he was agitated, kind of walking back and forth. I'd asked him if he needed anything because I wasn't sure if he was up here to get something or was looking for something, which wouldn't be unusual for people to come up here. So he was here, talked for a couple minutes, the 3 of us, and a couple minutes later, Amber came into the office and the 3 of us were in the office, and Amber came in, and she was asking him to tell him to come back to the house. Please come back. I'm sorry, come back. And he stood here, reluctant to go, didn't want to go, and a little exchange back and forth. He left the office and got into his vehicle and started it up, and Amber went outside and stood in front of the vehicle so that didn't drive away. Amber was standing in front of it, and again, she was asking him to don't leave. I'm sorry. Come back to the house. After a couple minutes, she got in the vehicle and they left to go back to their house.
What happened after they went back up to the house?
CJ and I were still in the office and weren't really sure. Decided that maybe it would be best if we just drove up there just to make sure that everything was okay. And so we got in the golf cart and we drove up to their house, got into the parking lot, and his vehicle was in the parking lot, and you could hear them. You can hear them inside the. You could hear inside the house yelling, Amber yelling, and Johnny answering back, and you could really hear what was being said. We stood there for a couple minutes, CJ and myself, and then you started to hear. It became audible. Amber was telling him that he was a washed-up actor. He was going to die a fat, lonely old man. Then you heard, you hit me with a can. You heard Johnny say, you hit me with a can. And then he came down the steps, and Amber was behind him, and she had a bottle in her hand. It was removed, and there was a brief pause at the moment, I think, of initial shock or uncertainty of why, that we were there. Neither Johnny nor Amber knew that we were there. He proceeded to walk back to the John Deere, and she again walked. He was just sitting in the seat. Amber came up to him and was asking him to come back in the house, that she was sorry, please come back in the house. He didn't come out of the seat, and she was hugging and kissing him, and I love you, I love you. She was telling him I loved you. He didn't react. Johnny sat there, eventually got out of the John Deere, and proceeded to start to walk away. At that time, Amber started to grab at him and his shirt, and trying to pull him back to the house, just basically viciously trying to pull him back and get him back to the house, and yelling at him. And at that point, I was between them, and felt it was best, and I was getting worried about what was going to happen, and it was best that I remove him from the situation. And so CJ took Amber back to the house, and I walked Johnny over to the cafe, which was basically 30 seconds away from the house, because it was the only place I could take him to at the time.
And you mentioned that Ms. Heard was viciously trying to pull Mr. Depp back. Can you explain what you mean by that?
It was like clawing, grabbing at his clothes, grabbing his hair, trying to pull him back, like an angry, like he was leaving and come back. He couldn't leave in the vehicle because the keys had been taken out. So there wasn't a way for Johnny to drive away. The only way was for him to walk away, and it wasn't a pleasant situation of wanting him to not leave, and angry and yelling and just yelling, come back, don't leave, and things like that.
At any point, did Mr. Depp hit or touch Ms. Heard?
Objection leading.
All right, let's see an objection.
Ms. Roberts, how did Mr. Depp react to Ms. Heard viciously grabbing him?
He didn't. He stood there with his arms by his side, and he didn't do anything.
Okay. Ms. Roberts, when you were back in the cafe with Mr. Depp, what happened next?
I was concerned because I had heard him say that he'd gone.
Objection to her being concerned. That's not responsive.
I'll sustain as to concerned. All right.
Okay, Ms. Roberts, without testifying as how you felt, what did you observe when you went back to the cafe with Mr. Depp?
When we went back to the cafe, he had a mark across the bridge of his nose. I got a bag of ice to put on it so that it wouldn't swell. Just to make sure that it wasn't bleeding, and he walked over to the love seat at the cafe, and he laid down and went to sleep. And CJ came back over, and I asked CJ to stay there for the remainder of the evening, for the remainder of the morning, and I left CJ inside the cafe, and I left Johnny on the couch.
When did you next see Ms. Heard?
That morning, I saw her that morning.
How close were you to Miss Heard when you interacted with her the next morning?
Conversation in a couple feet away.
When you saw her, how did she appear?
They had guests leaving, and it was kind of a normal morning, going down to the beach to see the guests leave.
What, if any, makeup was Miss Heard wearing?
Again, I'm not sure if she wore makeup on the island. If it was very natural looking.
What, if any, injuries did you observe on Miss Heard?
I didn't observe any.
What, if any, injuries did you observe on Mr. Depp?
The marking across the bridge of his nose.
When did Miss Heard and Mr. Depp leave the island?
I believe they left that afternoon. The guests left in the morning, and I believe they left that afternoon.
After Miss Heard and Mr. Depp left the island, what did you do next?
Our usual, we go into the buildings and we break them down. We empty out the refrigerators, garbage, take all the perishables out of the house, straighten the place up, take the linens away.
Let me just say real quick, I couldn't understand why they kept asking questions about the makeup. And it hit me that she's probably asking so many questions about the makeup in order to show that Amber didn't put makeup on to cover up any bruises he gave. That's the only conclusion I can come up with. And then when I figured it out, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Things like that.
What did you observe when you went through that process?
The island was as it was when they arrived. The only thing that was different was there was the liquid on the deck with a can, I believe, of mineral spirits or something there next to it, which had leaked out onto the deck. And then in the over the railing were paintbrushes and art supplies, paintbrushes, paint tubes, big jars that the paints are in, and those were all scattered in the bush.
Ms. Roberts, when is the first time you provided testimony about this incident in December 2015?
I believe it was for another case in May 2020.
Ms. Roberts, how often have you seen Mr. Depp drink alcohol on the island?
He goes through periods of time where he's been here and he doesn't drink, and it's non-alcoholic Beck's or something like that. It varies. Sometimes he drinks when he's here, sometimes he doesn't.
How often have you seen Ms. Heard drink alcohol on the island?
She drank wine. She drank wine with her drink was wine with dinner, maybe in the afternoon, but I know definitely with dinner.
Did you observe Ms. Heard drinking alcohol when Mr. Depp was not drinking alcohol?
Objection leading.
No, sustained is leading.
Okay. How often have you seen Mr. Depp drunk?
I would know he has a huge tolerance for alcohol. I haven't seen him passed out drunk or anything like that. So he drinks, but I haven't seen him passed out drunk.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Roberts. Nothing further.
All right, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Roberts, the salary you receive for managing the Bahama Island is approximately $10,000 a month, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so that comes out to $120,000 a year? Correct? Okay. And you've been receiving that salary for many years, correct?
Correct.
Right. In fact, I think you got a raise to $10,010 in 2018. Do you remember that?
No, I don't know the exact number, but I know I get that a month.
Okay. And that's in addition to all of the expenses, correct? For running the island.
The expenses,
Of running the island.
I get a salary every month. I'm not sure what you're asking me.
So the other people that are on the island, to the extent they work, they get a different salary, right?
Yes,
Okay, and all of the expenses you have, you talked about what you have to do to provision the island and everything else and run it. All of those expenses are paid separately, correct?
correct.
Okay. And you said you've been managing this island for 15 years for Mr. Depp, is that correct?
Approximately, yes.
All right. Now, let's talk for a moment about those two videos that you testified to were part of the house. The first video was missing both the closet and the bathroom, correct?
I don't remember. I'd have to look at it again.
All right. And the
There
second...
was sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. You didn't come through. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I think in the first video, the beads were the closet, and then there was the bathroom next to the closet.
Okay. That was
That's what you asked me.
That was the second video.
Oh.
Do you know who?
Sorry.
Do you know who took those videos?
Oh, I did.
Okay. When did you take those videos?
Oh, it would have to be, I'm not sure, a couple of years ago, maybe longer. I'm not sure.
Okay. Did you take those videos for the UK trial?
I don't recall if it was for that.
Right. Is there a reason that the closet and the bathroom were left out of the first video?
No, I stood in the house and did a circle around of the house.
Okay. Who asked you to make that video?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Was it Mr. Waldman? Adam Waldman?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Can't recall?
I can't remember who asked me.
Okay.
No, I can't.
Okay. Now the second video, that shows the closet and then there's a door there. Would you agree that door opens up into a bathroom?
Next to the closet, yes.
Okay. And we don't have a video of the bathroom, correct?
I don't believe there was a video of the bathroom.
And no one asked you to make a video of the bathroom, correct?
Objection, relevance.
I'll overrule it for now. Okay.
Correct?
Oh, sorry. I'm not sure if anybody asked me to. I don't believe I videotaped the bathroom.
Okay. And my question was, and no one asked you to videotape the bathroom, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, let's talk for a moment about the logistics of the island. So, Mr. Depp's house, we've seen the inside of, and you said that the cafe was a 30-second walk, I think you said. How many yards?
Yeah. I don't know. I walk it. It's just outside his house through the parking lot and walkway to the cafe.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, and the cafe is where Mr. Depp would regularly have his meals, correct?
Correct. All the guests would have their meals there.
Okay, including Mr. Depp and Ms. Hurd if she was there, and their children, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and
For
then
dinners, yes.
and then you were located on the other side of the island, correct? That's where you stay?
Or I stay in the middle of the island, yes.
Okay, how far away is that from the cafe and the house?
Objection, compound.
I'll sustain the objection if you want.
How far away is it from the house?
Where I stay?
Yes.
Probably a 3-minute golf cart ride,
Okay.
5-minute walk.
Okay. And then when other guests come, I think you were talking about tents. Do they stay in tents?
No, the tents were erected for the wedding, and then they were dismantled. And sometimes we would erect them if we were asked to, just in case somebody wanted to stay there. But people didn't stay in the tents; they stayed in the buildings here.
Okay, so how much accommodation can you handle in the buildings for other guests? I'm not talking about the house, Mr. Depp's house. We've seen that. But how many people can actually be accommodated in the buildings?
We have a 2-bedroom yurt on Brando Beach. We have a beach house which has the bed in it, and then we have what we call a roundhouse, which has a bed in it as well.
Okay. Now, when Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard were visiting, whether they had the children there or not, typically, would you bring the meals to the cafe for each of the meals?
No, sometimes I would take them to the house. It depended on where they wanted to eat.
All right, and then typically would you join them for the meal, or would you leave the meal and then come back and clean up afterwards?
Objection, compound.
All right. I'll sustain the objection.
All right, we'll take that one at a time. Typically, would you bring the meals to them?
Myself or one of the workers here would take the meals.
Okay, how often was it you that would take them?
How often? Maybe every other day, every day. It depended on how, if people were eating in their buildings or eating together.
All right, and would you stay and eat the meal with them, or would you leave?
If we were invited for dinner, we would all eat together. Usually we would take the food to the places and leave.
Okay. And then would you be called to come pick them up?
No. We would sometimes go back in the evenings on our own and clean up and turn some of the lights off. And sometimes we would do it in the morning. It depended on what was happening.
Okay. So other than bringing the meals, and it could be you or somebody else, how often did you interact with Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard during the days when they were on the island?
On average, every day.
In what context other than delivering the meals and picking them up?
Oh, just seeing if anything was needed, if everything was all right, things like that. Generally passing them if they were walking or in the office or on the beach.
Okay. Now, would it be fair to say that you weren't spending 24/7 with them?
No, I didn't live with them, no.
Okay. And would it be fair to say that you don't know what they were doing during the times that you weren't passing them by or bringing meals?
Yes, unless they were on the beach.
Okay.
Then I would know. But
So you wouldn't know what happened, what would be taking place within the house, for example, when you weren't there, correct?
correct.
And you wouldn't know whether Mr. Depp was taking drugs, correct?
Correct.
And you wouldn't know whether Mr. Depp was drinking, correct?
I would only know by cleaning up.
Okay. And you wouldn't know, well, you wouldn't know from cleaning up necessarily whether it was Mr. Depp, Ms. Heard, or somebody else, would you?
Objection, compound.
What was,
Overruled, I'll allow it. Go ahead.
Please continue.
unless I would know what it was by what was in the garbage or left out of who consumed or what was consumed, I would be able to know.
Okay. And you wouldn't know what arguments, if there were any, were taking place in that house behind closed doors, right?
Correct.
And you wouldn't know whether there was any kind of physical abuse that was taking place behind those closed doors, correct?
I wouldn't know. Correct.
Okay. Now, let me just take you for a moment to the December 2015 timeframe. How much advance notice are you typically given for when Mr. Depp and his entourage are going to arrive and for how long they're going to stay?
Objection compound.
All right, I'll sustain the objection.
All right, let's break it down. How much notice are you given when Mr. Depp and his entourage are coming?
It varies. Sometimes it's a couple days, sometimes it's a couple weeks.
So how much notice were you given in December of 2015 to who would be coming for Christmas on the Bahama Island?
I believe sometime in November
Okay.
for that trip.
All right. And in November, how many people were you told were coming for Christmas on the island?
I don't recall how many people.
It was a lot more than Amber, Johnny, Lily Rose, Jack, and Lily Rose's boyfriend, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
In fact, it was Amber's parents, correct?
I believe so.
And it was Rocky Pennington and Josh Drew, correct?
I believe they were on the list.
And Rocky Pennington's parents?
Yes, I believe they were on the list.
Do you recall them canceling?
Objection hearsay.
I recall.
How is that hearsay?
I'll overrule the objection. Go ahead.
I recall there was a change to the guests.
When did you learn of that?
I don't recall. Maybe a couple weeks after. Maybe it's beginning of December. Maybe middle of December. I'm not sure.
Do you recall if it was after December 15?
I don't recall.
Did you think that was a little strange that here these people were going to be at
Objection.
Christmas on the island and suddenly they cancel?
Objection relevance.
I think it's highly relevant.
I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
What, if anything, were you told about why they canceled?
Objection hearsay.
Party opponent admission.
We've
Well,
laid
you
a
don't know.
foundation for that.
Okay. Who told you that Amber's parents, her best friend and fiance, and her best friend's parents were suddenly canceling coming for Christmas on the island?
Objection compound.
I'll allow that. Go ahead.
I don't know who told me, but I did receive I did receive information that they weren't coming and there were somebody else was coming instead.
And who was that somebody else coming instead?
That it would be Alice and it would be Alice and Greg and the children and the nanny.
And they were coming later, right?
They would be joining. That I think was the words.
Okay. So on the December trip, you testified about a few arguments between Amber and Johnny, right? Do you recall that testimony?
Yes, I do.
Okay. You weren't present when Johnny sustained the gash on his nose, correct?
I wasn't there. No.
Okay. And you weren't present when the mess was made through the paints that you've described, correct?
No.
And so you don't know whether there had been a physical altercation and that led to throwing a paint can to try to slow down Johnny, right?
No, I just heard yelling in the house.
Okay, but that yelling in the house wasn't necessarily the same time, was it? You don't know, do you?
No, it was all in the same.
Okay, no.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the summer of 2013. Are you aware that Paul Bettany claims he's never met Amber?
Objection, relevance,
What's the
and calls for
The
hearsay.
relevance is she testified that he was there on the island with her.
And calls for hearsay.
I can ask the question and see if she says.
All right, I'll allow the question. Go ahead.
Can you repeat it?
Are you aware that Paul Bettany has said that he never met Amber Heard?
No, I'm unaware. I don't know that.
Well, let's stay on the summer of 2013 if we can. Do you have a recollection of Amber and Johnny, Lily Rose and Jack taking one final trip on the yacht that Johnny was going to be selling to J.K. Rowling?
I don't know what year that was. I don't know what year that was, but I do remember the yacht being sold.
If I tell you it was July of 2013, does that help refresh your recollection? July 9?
Yeah,
All right. Now,
it doesn't. I just know the yacht was sold.
okay, and you made arrangements, did you not, for a captain to captain the yacht and for them to go out on the yacht?
No, I didn't have any responsibility for the yacht and the crew on the yacht.
Okay. Do you have a recollection of being called because Lily Rose and Jack were upset and they wanted to leave the yacht and have a helicopter take them away?
Objection, hearsay, and compound.
I'm asking whether she has a recollection of this.
I'll allow the question.
Can you ask me it again?
Do you have a recollection of Lily Rose and Jack being upset on the yacht and wanting to leave it immediately, so you arranged for a helicopter to come in to fly them away with Amber?
Objection, compound.
I'll allow it. Okay, let's just hear.
I don't know if Lily Rose and Jack were upset. I do know that I did arrange for transportation off the island at the time.
And in fact, Amber went with Lily Rose, correct?
It was Amber and her friend and Lily Rose.
Okay. And Jack decided at the last minute to stay back, correct?
I don't know if he decided last minute. He stayed.
Okay. Do you recall Lily Rose telling you that she was upset because her father was drinking and trying to hide it from him?
Objection, hearsay.
I'm asking whether she has a
I'll
recollection.
sustain the objection. to
Okay.
that.
Then I'll ask the next one. Do you recall Mr. Depp passing out in the sand face first?
I recall that he was passed out on the beach. He was out on the beach. Yes.
Okay. And do you recall Jack calling you because he was concerned?
Objection, hearsay.
That's just asking if he called. I haven't asked what he said.
No, you did. I'll sustain the objection.
Okay. Do you have a recollection of Jack being present when Mr. Depp was passed out face first in the sand?
Yes.
And do you have a recollection of Jack being upset?
I don't have a recollection of him being upset.
Do you have a recollection of him being happy about it?
No, I didn't speak with Jack about it.
Okay. But you recall that Mr. Depp was passed out face first in the sand, correct?
Objection, asked and answered.
I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
All right, thank you. Let's talk about makeup for a moment. So you don't know what type of makeup regimen Amber uses every day, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And in fact, you don't know, you said at one point you're not sure, but it's a natural look. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And would you agree that there are a number of different types of makeup you can use that would still give you a natural look?
Objection calls for speculation.
I'll allow it.
I'm guessing there is, yes.
Okay, okay. And there's sun in the Bahamas, right?
Most of the time.
Do you know what Amber wears for sunscreen?
I think it was, at one point I had a brand Shishido or something like that was on the island that we provided.
And do you know whether Amber brought her own as well?
I don't know.
Do you know whether Amber had a skin condition?
I wasn't told.
Okay. But I take it you didn't ask.
No, I wouldn't have asked if somebody had a skin condition.
Okay. The wedding. The wedding was planned at sunset, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, it went forward at sunset, correct?
It went earlier. It was earlier than sunset.
So your recollection is that there's no sunset pictures at the wedding?
Are there any
Okay.
there was sunset pictures.
Okay. So last couple questions. The makeup or not makeup, you were asked whether you observed any injuries on Amber in the December 2015 timeframe. Do you believe Amber would cover up bruises to hide them from the kids?
Objection calls for speculation.
I'll sustain this.
Do you have any understanding, based on your knowledge of Amber, whether she would try to cover up any bruises or cuts
Same
to
objection.
keep them from the kids?
I'll sustain the objection.
You said that you didn't believe that Amber was wearing much makeup, but you said she participated in a photo shoot in December 2015. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Do you know whether Amber was wearing any makeup for a photo shoot?
I'm not sure the part that I saw, she was in and out of the water.
Do you know whether Amber would want to show bruises or cuts in a photo shoot?
Objection calls for speculation.
I'll sustain the objection.
I have no further questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, redirect. Redirect.
Ms. Roberts, how many times have you seen Mr. Depp consume drugs?
Objection, leading.
All right, sustained.
Ms. Bertahoff asked you about Mr. Depp passed out on the beach. How would you describe Mr. Depp when you saw him on the beach?
He was passed out. I picked him up and brushed him off, and I left him underneath I believe he was in a hammock, and I believe he had fallen asleep, or he was asleep, and the hammock had overturned, and I picked him up and brushed him off and left him underneath the lanai with Jack.
Okay, no further questions.
All
Thank
right,
you,
is
Ms.
this witness
Roberts.
subject to recall, Ms. Roberts?
Yes, potentially.
All right.
So we'll...
Ms. Roberts, since you're subject to recall, did not discuss your testimony with anybody and just did not watch anything about this case, okay, ma'am?
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right, your next witness.
Dr. Shannon Curry. She'll come right now.
Dr. who?
Shannon Curry.
Can you, is it C-U-R-R-Y?
C-U-R-R-Y. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Dr. Curry.
Good morning.
I'm Wayne Dennison. Could you state your full name for the record?
Shannon Curry.
What do you do for a living?
I am a clinical and forensic psychologist.
What's your educational background?
I started college at Georgetown University. I then transferred to the University of California, Irvine, where I received my bachelor's degree in psychology and social behavior. I completed my master's degree in psychology at Pepperdine University. I went on to complete my doctoral degree in clinical psychology at Pepperdine University, which included several training rotations at different practicum sites. Those are essentially clinical rotations we do to learn various types of psychology. You learn how to do psychological assessment, counseling, etc., and you do that in a variety of different settings. And then I completed a year-long doctoral internship at an American Psychological Association accredited doctoral internship. You do this year before you get your degree, and that was at Tripler Army Medical Center. It's traditionally a military internship. They did admit 2 civilians. I was lucky enough to be one of them. I then completed 2 years of postdoctoral training at Hawaii State Hospital, a locked forensic psychology facility, and that's where you essentially have individuals with severe mental illness who have committed crimes.
Have you done any additional coursework or educational work?
I have. So after I completed my doctorate and my postdoctoral training, I obtained it's called a postdoctoral Master of Science degree in clinical psychopharmacology. That is for partial fulfillment of prescription privileges, meaning that it's part of what we need to be able to prescribe medications as a psychologist, because psychologists don't traditionally prescribe, and we can do that with certain military jurisdictions in other states. I also obtained advanced training in the Gottman method of couples therapy. I completed all 3 levels of training, and then I'm also a Gottman educator for several workshops involving helping parents learn how to prepare to bring their baby home and helping couples without serious problems improve their relationships.
All right. What's the Gottman method?
The Gottman method is a highly research-based method of couples therapy. It's very structured, so different than what many people expect when they think about couples therapy. I always tell my clients I don't want them to come in, just tell each other all their problems, and then have an awkward, silent drive home. In this therapy, they come in, they complete a really structured assessment in the beginning. So they complete a bunch of questions. It gives me a ton of information about their relationship before we even get started, and really identifies the areas we're going to target with structured interventions during each session. I think of it almost like a class.
Okay. Did you get, in the course of your education, any specialized training?
Any what?
Specialized training?
I did. So my internship specifically was dedicated to essentially working with post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic stress. A lot of my training has been with psychological assessment and testing. And then my training during practicum and then in my postdoctoral work was dedicated to working with trauma populations and also conducting forensic psychological assessments. Oftentimes, forensic psychological assessments actually refers to doing testing and an interview and a couple other things for purposes related to law. So it's the application of psychology to the courts, to legal issues. And sometimes that also involves doing assessments for the military to determine whether somebody has sustained a mental disability after combat.
You indicated that you did some work at Tripler. What's Tripler and what's the work you did?
So Tripler Army Medical Center is a hospital in Honolulu, Hawaii. If anybody's ever gotten to have a vacation in Hawaii, it's a giant pink building there. And it's one of the top training sites for military psychologists. I was very, very lucky to be able to train there. They have wonderful funding and a lot of new research going on, particularly for PTSD, but really for all areas of mental health. While I was there, I did rotations in family psychology, so doing family therapy. I worked with children, but I also did a neuropsychology rotation, learning really the ins and outs of advanced psychological assessment, identifying not just mental issues, mental illness, but also traumatic brain injuries after trauma, and doing those PTSD evaluations, and then also working with service members who were struggling with a whole host of issues, military stressors, normal life stressors, and then also those who sustained tremendous trauma from combat.
Do you still continue to work with the military?
I do, actually. My practice is very focused on military service members, veterans, and their families.
Okay. What work have you done in prior litigation matters?
Well, most of my litigation, if we're talking about civil work, that has mostly been reports. So this is my first time testifying in a civil matter. The majority of my forensic work has been in criminal law or providing psychological assessments, and then I produce a really methodical report, which is typically reviewed by a judge, and a determination is made, or usually there's a settlement beforehand.
Okay. Do you work in connection with any particular courts?
I do. So I am actually not sure if I'm on the list anymore in Honolulu, but I am a certified forensic evaluator for the state of Hawaii, which means that I have been appointed by the court to conduct evaluations for matters that are presented. And then I'm also on the list of forensic evaluators in several courts in Southern California. And then I'm contracted by the military, the Department of Defense, now and again for evaluations of PTSD from service members.
Okay, you mentioned PTSD a couple of times now.
Yes.
What are you referring to there?
So PTSD is a mental illness. It can develop after a person has been exposed to a traumatic event. And our Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the DSM, is sort of the authoritative manual of mental illnesses. It's considered our Bible of mental illness. We go there for diagnoses. And according to that, there's a specific type of trauma that a person must experience for them to be able to qualify for a diagnosis of PTSD. And that's an event that is life-threatening. It can also involve sexual assault, and you can experience that either directly, but you can also be traumatized if you've seen it happen to somebody else, or if it's happened unexpectedly or violently to somebody close to you, a family member or a friend. And then there's also a provision for people who are first responders, if they're encountering really traumatic information regularly, that qualifies as a trauma. Now, there are a number of symptoms that can develop.
Sure. We'll talk about that some
Okay.
more. Do you hold any credentials relevant to the work that you do?
Well, I am a licensed psychologist.
Where?
In California and Hawaii.
Okay. And any other certifications or other credentials?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head other than the training with the Gottman method of couples therapy.
Okay. Have you worked with the Hawaii Department of Courts and Corrections?
Yes, I have.
In what capacity?
Well, so that I guess would be a credential. So I am a certified forensic evaluator for the state of Hawaii.
In connection with your doctorate, was there a research component?
There was. So would you like me to tell you about it?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I conducted a research study while I was at Pepperdine completing my doctorate. It's called a dissertation. So when you're obtaining your doctorate, you contribute something to the scientific field that you're in. And typically that involves doing what we call novel science. So you're doing an experiment, you're finding out new information and helping the field progress. So I did research in Peru, and I was essentially looking at the effectiveness of a therapy intervention there for kids who were growing up in this community called Ayacucho, which was exposed to 20 years of guerrilla warfare, the longest guerrilla war in the history of the world. And there were a lot of issues in that community, tremendous trauma. And my research was around finding interventions that were really effective for that community.
Where do you work now?
I work for the Curry Psychology Group.
What does the Curry Psychology Group do?
We're a multi-specialty mental health center, so we have neuropsychologists who do testing for kids. We have therapists, individual therapists, couples therapists, family therapists. We even have a meditation teacher. We basically try to meet the needs of our community, and we highly specialize in working with military personnel and their families.
Who's the Curry and Curry Psychology Group?
I'm Dr. Curry.
How many people work for you?
As of right now, I believe it's 13.
How long have you been doing this kind of work?
For about 15 years.
How much of your therapy practice focuses on treating individuals?
I would say about half of it is individuals, half is couples.
Okay. Do you do any training of students?
I do.
What's that?
So we have several unlicensed professionals at our office, and they're earning their additional hours so that they can get licensed. So they're able to see clients, and then I meet with them regularly to supervise them, discuss their cases, provide them with information about different diagnoses, interventions, and treatment methods.
How did you get involved in this case?
I was contacted by Ms. Camille Vasquez, one of the attorneys for Mr. Depp.
Okay, and what was the nature of the contact?
Ms. Vasquez called me and indicated that she might be interested in having me meet the legal team so that I could discuss my expertise and possibly provide my opinions related to the matter.
What were you asked to provide expert opinion on?
So initially, my role that I understood at the time was to review the case materials and provide my opinions regarding anything that I noticed that was consistent or even inconsistent with the psychological science that exists today on intimate partner violence in Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard's relationship.
Okay. All right, you used a phrase there, intimate partner violence. What are you talking about?
So there are a multitude of different definitions depending on the source or the state. But essentially, intimate partner violence is abuse. It could be physical, psychological, and it's from one partner to another in an intimate relationship.
Okay. Did your role in this case evolve over time?
Yes, it shifted. So I was retained at the end of January 2021, and then had just barely begun to review the documents. The case was postponed, and then in October 2021, I was asked by counsel to provide a psychological evaluation of Ms. Heard.
Okay. Were you ever asked to do a psychological evaluation of Mr. Depp?
No.
Okay.
What types of documents did you consider in this analysis?
So I reviewed quite a few documents as part of my evaluation. That included all of the case documents, Ms. Heard's medical records by Dr. Kipper, her prior mental health treatment records. I believe I reviewed records from Dr. Amy Banks, Dr. Bonnie Jacobs, Dr. Connell Cohen, and also a significant portion of my review involved notes from Nurse Erin Filati, at the time Erin Borum, who spent a significant time with Ms. Heard in her direct company. I also reviewed exhibits, quite a few audio recordings, a video recording, several video recordings, or possibly photographs. I might be getting them confused, and multiple witness statements, testimony, and declarations.
Did there come a time when you met directly with Ms. Heard?
Yes, I did. So in conducting my evaluation, I met with Ms. Hurd on 2 separate dates, December 10th and December 17th, 2021.
Approximately how much time have you spent with Ms. Hurd?
So the evaluation, we spent 12 hours directly with one another. However, there were more hours involved in the evaluation with some breaks. So we spent 7 hours together on the first day, December 10th. Not necessarily together because there was a 1 hour lunch break and about a half hour with breaks split up through the day. And then on the 17th, we spent a little more than 8 hours in the evaluation from start to finish, with a 1 hour break and another half hour of breaks distributed throughout the day.
As a result of the work that you performed, did you form any opinions with respect to Ms. Hurd?
I did.
What were those opinions?
The results of Ms. Hurd's evaluation supported 2 diagnoses: borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder.
What is a diagnosis?
A diagnosis is a way that that psychologists, psychiatrists, anybody in the mental health field thinks about a disorder. It helps us to communicate a set of symptoms that a person is experiencing, and along with that set of symptoms, it tells other professionals a lot about how those symptoms might have developed, how that person might behave, perceive the world. It also drives treatment. The real purpose is to determine what sort of interventions will be most effective for the person.
Yeah. Previously, you made reference to, I think you called it the DSM-5. What's
Yes.
that?
So the DSM-5, that stands for the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, version 5, and that contains every diagnosis we use in mental health, and it's the authoritative manual of mental diagnoses.
Is performing diagnoses something you typically do in your line of work?
Yes.
Thank you. So you referenced 2 personality disorders. What's a personality disorder?
To understand a personality disorder, I think it can be helpful first to kind of define personality. So personality, something we take for granted, but these are the traits, the characteristics, the way we think, we feel, and we act that make us who we are. And these traits are pretty stable over time and across situations. We might, be sure to mind our P's and Q's when we're meeting somebody new, but overall, if somebody were to describe us or if we were to describe ourselves, we have a pretty good sense of who we are. Sometimes an easy way to think of it is imagining how you might describe a brother or sister or a child if you have children. Their personalities are pretty clear to you. A personality disorder is some sort of dysfunction in those enduring traits. So as opposed to other types of mental illness, when you think about something like depression, that's episodic. It comes and it goes, and when it's treated with medication, it can pretty much be completely mitigated or minimized in a person's life, and their personality is still there, separate from the depression. When we have a personality disorder, there are going to be disturbances in several different areas that are visible in almost all different facets of their life.
Is there a manner in which personality disorders are commonly diagnosed?
Yes, so they can be diagnosed in a treating environment. Treating psychologist or a therapist or a psychiatrist simply does a diagnostic interview, which involves assessing multiple areas of a person's history back down through childhood.
I'm going to stop you for a second.
Yes.
What's a treating environment?
Sometimes I'll slip into these words. I apologize. So a treating environment in therapy, if somebody is going in for treatment, the mental health provider will ask them questions to find out what sort of symptoms they've experienced and what sort of things have occurred in their life that might be consistent with these disorders, or rule out these disorders, prove that there is no reason for these disorders to be considered. They might also pay attention to their observations of the client over time and new information the client provides them. The most reliable way, however, to ever come about a diagnosis really is through a comprehensive psychological assessment. And I might use the words assessment, examination, testing interchangeably. They all mean the same thing. It's combining information from multiple different sources One main source is psychological testing using validated objective measures. That means that they've been tested, they've been shown to be accurate for testing what you want to test, and in the environment you're testing. So there are measures specific for court environments where someone might respond differently. You integrate that with the same interview I was telling you that people would do for therapy. We do that as well. And then in a courtroom setting, you're going to look at all the legal records, all of those documents, corroborating information to sort of check your hypotheses that may be developing, and also check against the examinee's statements to confirm whether you have enough evidence of a certain diagnosis.
So what's a clinical interview?
A clinical interview is a very comprehensive interview. It includes a person's entire life history, as well as very specifically looks at any symptoms they might have. This can start as far back as birth. You might find out if there were any issues with their delivery, any genetic issues, any intellectual issues. How did they do? What was their home life like? How was discipline handled? What's their relationship with their primary caregivers? Were they raised by an aunt, an uncle, their parents? How many siblings do they have? How do they get along with their siblings? How many times did they have to move? Was there any abuse? Did they have any really significant life experiences that come to mind when they think about their childhood? How were they as a student? Did they need special services? Did they get in trouble at school? And you do this, you continue on high school. What were their hobbies? Did they play sports? How many friends did they have? Did they have any trouble keeping those friendships? Then you get into adulthood. Did they go to college? Did they not go to college? How come? What sort of jobs have they held? How did those jobs go? How did they end? That's always an important question. What sort of romantic relationships have they been involved in? How do they identify sexually, culturally? Let's see, what else? What sort of symptoms have they experienced? You go through the entire gamut of some of the main symptoms. You might screen for depression, any disorganized thinking. That means thinking that isn't necessarily in touch with reality, and any current distress they may be having today.
How did you conclude that Ms. Heard suffers from the personality disorders that you identified?
So there was information that supported it from multiple sources. I conducted testing, including one of the main tests that I used. She obtained scores that were consistent with those diagnoses. And then I also, there was evidence of those diagnoses in her records and in her self-report.
Okay.
All right, Council, why don't we just go ahead and pause for a second while we go ahead and take our morning recess, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and take our 15-minute morning recess. Do not discuss the case and do not do any outside research, okay?
And there you have it, folks. But yeah, Candy Apple's actually 100% right. Science and psychology do not go hand in hand. And many scientists think psychology is just garbage. I really think it's where the name Scientology came from, to be honest with you. I can't prove that, but I've always believed that because science and psychology are just totally different ends of the spectrum. He's a killer he was a YouTuber, Jonathan, who made anime, and he did really good anime. And he ended up killing two people and then himself. So 3 people altogether. Whenever I think anime, I think of him. What is the point of this? This is like the weirdest symbol I've ever seen. If you really think about it. So killing another man is your status symbol? Okay. That actually looks like a female. That looks like a female boob. Female killing the man. I like it. I'm liking it. Women power. She's holding a dick. Saying, that's right, motherfucker, I got you. I got your penis in my hand. I own you. That's what that looks like. This definitely looks like a penis. A big one, but that's a penis. This is a female boob. Oh, you guys can't see my little cursor. I don't know why you can't see my cursor. I think his name is Randy Shears. It's Randy something. I don't know why you can't see my cursor. That's so weird. Strange. Something, Becca, someone told me it's because that's where the article was written or something, and they figured that they would get a better jury there than they would in California. Something like that. Like, I haven't followed the case from the beginning. I just really started following it yesterday. So I'm trying to catch up and get you guys all the right answers. How can the lawyers hire this lady to go over Amber's psychology reports? Well, I think this is Johnny's attorney. But if you guys see that long thing, since you can't see my cursor, that long thing, make it bigger. That's a penis. And then that's a female boob. So I think a female has beat a man. And that is the symbol for Virginia. The woman cut off the penis and is stepping on him. Boom. Poor penis, I'm telling you. She is very likable. I agree, Blake. I happen to like her. I'm a little jealous. Just a little. Do you agree it's a big waste of everyone's time and money just because they're not? Oh, Candy Apple, I totally agree with that. I don't think they're over each other. But I think he's just getting justification after getting demolished in, after getting demolished in the UK or wherever he lost. I think that's what this is. But what I don't understand, and I keep coming back to this, okay, someone help me with this. So she was recording him in 2013, 2014, 2012 is when she was recording him. But they didn't get married until 2015. So everything she did prior to them getting married is null and void. So if he was so horrible in 2013 and 2014, then why the fuck did you marry him in 2015? So I'm not buying it. That to me just made her 10 times less credible. I thought all the recordings were after they got married, but no, it's actually before they got married. So yeah, no, sorry, not buying it. I have a slightest feeling after this all. No, I don't think they'll get back together. This was all a plan on her part. I agree, Seashell, but like I said at the beginning of this live, I came into this with the preconceived notion that Johnny was going to get off just because he's Johnny Depp, and really truly thought that that's how this was going to go, and that, hey, Claire, and that she's going to, she really is a victim. That was my preconceived notion. But after hearing and seeing everything, no, that's changed. She completely set him up. And it proves it even further that she set him up by him having her marry him after all of that is said and done. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. No, I agree with you. Stranger things have happened, but I just don't see them getting back together. Maybe sleeping together, but I don't think getting back together. It's coming off nuts. I don't know if she's coming off nuts, but she's definitely, as a outsider who didn't watch the beginning, who really didn't follow them at all, because I just don't follow Hollywood people like that, I'm really thinking that I'm really seeing it as a setup, and I'm sure the jury is too. And I don't know if I see it like that because of everything I've been through with the courts and with an ex like that, or if everybody sees that, even if you've never been in a toxic relationship. I don't know. They knew each... Well, yeah, all those video recordings were before they got married. Why did they get married? That's my whole point. But I don't know, did she set the tone? I don't know. But if she's histrionic and borderline personality disorder, I might say yes. She was setting him up. I agree. She definitely was. I'm busy working. Next thing I hear, Laura, with the woman gutting things off. I laugh so loud. That's a good thing, Tony. That's what I don't understand, Blank. You usually record things like... Most normal people are going to record stuff if they know they're going to end up in court. If they know they're going to need this for a divorce. If their lawyers recommend, you know, hey, you might want to record this. If an abuser is being abused so badly and nobody believes you, then you would record it. So I totally get all those reasons that one would record it. However, none of that played true in this because she married him after the fact. So if he was this big abuser, why'd you marry him 2 years later? Secondly, they weren't even married yet, so there was no divorce yet. So any single reason why one would have to record, she doesn't check any of them. So why was she recording him? To set him up. That's the only logical reason left, was to set him up. And that's sad because nobody deserves that, especially a drug addict, especially someone that's on drugs. You don't need to be set up when you're on drugs, you know? It's just not right. And it's not fair. Shit. You know, it's just not fair to do that to somebody. I know when I was on drugs, I didn't want to fucking... I wouldn't want anyone recording me. Hell no. No, I'm telling you, that's a penis. That is women overtaking man. I agree, Rain. And she recorded it before they got married. There was no getting married. There was no divorce at this point. They weren't even married yet. So why did she do that? It's sick. That's just messed up. I don't see her being histrionic because she can control a public image like a narcissist, whereas MGL is classic histrionic. It doesn't matter who's watching, she can't contain. There is a fine line between histrionic and narcissistic. Very fine gray line. So you're telling me, Laura, that you didn't record? I did after we were in court, though. After I knew that we were in court. I still have the recordings. I asked my lawyer, well, now that he's dead, can I guess I could throw them out. They don't matter anymore. I could throw out all the paperwork. I could throw out everything. And even now I'm having a hard time throwing it out. I don't know why. I really don't know why I'm having a hard time throwing it out. It's so strange. He actually called me on the day he died. And I recorded that for some reason. And I said to his sister and his mom, I have no idea why I hit record. It was so strange because I have not recorded him since 2011. And something made me hit record and then he died later that night. How fucked up is that though? I mean, I have no idea why I recorded him. I don't know what possessed me to hit record. Have not done that since 2011 or 2012. And then he died hours later. It was fucked up. So I was like, well, I spoke to him earlier today. See, I don't know, Seashell. I just keep thinking, like, that last recording, that I won't give up. That I gave it to his sister, and that I'm keeping. But it's just one of those things, I don't know why I recorded him that day. But, you know, for court and stuff, yeah, I definitely, now I'm going to cry. I definitely recorded him once we were in court. But during our relationship, I never recorded him. Like, why would I? I don't know, Seashell. I'm kind of dying to throw out all this paperwork. I have suitcases full of court papers. Literally, suitcases. I think there's 5 full suitcases of court papers. I was like, wow, I could throw them all out. It's crazy, though. She's reading off a script. Well, she did. You know, one thing she said yesterday, though, she made it a point where she was like, Johnny, get off me, stop poking me. You know, he was probably just like, dude, go away. Or, you know, push him away. And she's making this big deal out of it, like, you know, oh my God, stop hitting me, stop pushing me, blah, blah, blah. It's just weird. You had reasons to record it. That's what I'm saying. There was no reason for her to record. What? Maybe Johnny didn't believe in a prenup. Or maybe he did. I don't know. The guy who designed it has the same last name as me? No shit. Get out of here, really? That's so funny. Flag and seal of Virginia. See, it was a Roman goddess. I was right. The Roman goddess, Virtue Virtus, is depicted holding a sword and a spear, and the tyrant she defeated is lying on the ground holding a chain. See, I was right. It is a female. I was right. It is a female who beat a man. That's crazy. See, guys, I'm smarter than y'all think. I think I'm smarter than I give myself credit for, really. It is a penis. They say it's a sword, but it looks like a penis. Who designed it? No, it's not my last name. Oh, yeah, you're right. That is too funny. Yeah, that's too funny, though. So now I doxed, like, really doxed. Thank God there's not a lot of people here. But, yeah, actually, it's the same name. But mine's a married name. But as far as I know, they don't have any family in Virginia. It's from a lot of Illinois and Iowa. But I'll have to ask her. I'll have to ask my mother-in-law. She hates being called mother-in-law. Because it's such like a fake marriage. But she likes me. The guy was a sculptor for New York. Interesting. Yeah, well, Keck, the married, none of them are from New York. I don't think there's any of them from New York. There's a road in Illinois called Keck Road. So she is an Amazon, yes. I knew it was a female. See, that's why I like Virginia. Women beat man holding a penis. If you look close, that is a penis. Trust me when I tell you it's a penis. If you blow it up and look at it, you can see it's a penis head. It's even got little dots on it. That's crazy, though. If someone did that today, that would never go down. No, it really is a penis head, though. I'm not joking. Blow up a penis, indeed. I'm telling you, Blink, it is. No, it's not on a string. Look, I'll show you guys. You guys think I'm crazy. Look. I can't see it though. Hold on. See? It's a penis. See what I mean? Total penis. Capone comes back for penis talk. It is. It's total penis. No, you gotta look at this end. It's not a sword head, it's a penis head. Women beat men. If that's not a phallic symbol, then I don't know what is. That is a 100% phallic symbol. Crazy, right? Charles Keck is the one that invented it. It's a woman holding it. And I thought it was a woman. Oh. We're back. Sarah, if you're listening, told you that man is not 5'10".
Thank you, Your Honor. But Dr. Curry, before the break, you were talking about some of the factors that you considered in determining that Ms. Heard suffers from personality disorders. And one of them, I think the last one you said before you left, was self-report. What do you mean by that?
So the self-report would be things that Ms. Heard indicated to me specifically. So there were a couple of characteristics that she noted in her self-report that were consistent with these personality disorders. The first was actually my own behavioral observations of her based on her self-report. So one of the hallmark characteristics of histrionic personality disorder is sort of a overly dramatic presentation. We call this impressionistic speech. So it tends to be very flowery. It uses a lot of descriptive words like magical, wonderful, and it can go on for quite some time, and yet it really lacks any substance. So at the end, you're left wondering what was just said or what the answer is to the actual question. So that occurred a number of times, and it also represented the quick shifts you'll see between emotions. So she would suddenly be one way, and then she would become very animated or very sad. And when people are displaying these emotions with this personality disorder, there's a sense of shallowness to it. People who are observing them will feel like it's almost play acting, and they might not be able to put their finger on it. But part of it is because of the rapidness with which the person can switch emotions, and also the lack of substance. They don't really refer to, I feel this way. They might describe emotions, they might describe events, but very rarely, and Ms. Heard did not say, I feel vulnerable. She never really indicated a vulnerable feeling of her own. Then the substance of her self-report. So when I was asking her information about her history.
Now MGL, because we always call her histrionic, now MGL is going to start using the I word. Watch. She's going to take everything this person says and relate it to her. Fucking guaranteed. Anybody wants to make me a $20 bet? Watch.
We're going to ask more about that later. I was just trying to get a sense of what a self-report was.
Oh, okay.
What psychological tests did you perform?
Okay, so psychological tests, I'll just go in order. So first of all, I asked her a couple questions from something called the mini mental status exam. That's really just a fancy way of saying that I wanted to make sure that she was alert and oriented to, we call it person, place, and time. That means she knew who she was, she knew who I was, she knew where we were, and she knew the date. That way I can ensure that she's able to participate in the evaluation and understand what's happening. I then administered something called the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory 2. The 2 means that it's the second edition. And this is something we call an objective measure. So it asks 567 questions, more statements, and the person either agrees or disagrees with them, how much the statement represents them. And this test has been around since 1943. There are more than 10,000 studies showing that it is appropriate for determining somebody's personality traits. It measures all of those things I sort of mentioned, how a person thinks, feels, and behaves in multiple different aspects of their lives. It also measures very accurately any signs of mental illness or dysfunction. And the reason I also really like this test, whenever you're using a test for an evaluation that's going to be used in a forensic setting, people have a lot of incentive to present themselves in a way that's going to benefit their case. And they may want to look like they're sicker than they really are. They may want to look much healthier than they really are. And some of those incentives, they may not even realize that they're intending to do that. So it can be conscious or unconscious, but you really need to have a test that can check for that. And the MMPI-2 has a set of validity scales, we call them. These are scales that measure really the truthfulness and accuracy with which a person is approaching the test. And these scales on this particular test have been so well researched over many decades that they've become very nuanced, and they can tell us a lot about if somebody's, for instance, exaggerating. Are they elevating one of the scales that shows that they're exaggerating on purpose? Are they exaggerating in a manner that's more like a cry for help? Are they exaggerating in a manner that's clever and sophisticated or more obvious? And then the same exact thing goes for trying to minimize symptoms. We have a number of scales that can show us all the different, if somebody's trying to say they're the most wonderful person on earth, or if they're just trying to deny problems, and if they're doing that again in a very clever way or more of an obvious way. So that test was my choice for this case. There's one other reason I'd like to add, is that part of my evaluation was, one of the reasons was to assess whether Ms. Heard has post-traumatic stress disorder, which I told you about earlier, as a result of the incidents that she's alleged occurred by Mr. Depp. And that's a really tough disorder to find out if somebody's faking it or not. It's one of the most easily faked disorders. Most of us know what it feels like to feel anxious. And a lot of people have seen war movies and movies that depict somebody having PTSD. In fact, some research has shown that if you give someone a diagnostic checklist and said, show that you have PTSD, they can do it 96% of the time, just someone on the street. So you really need a test that's very sensitive to that. And the MMPI-2 has been shown in multiple studies to be excellent at detecting those attempts.
Okay, you keep using MMPI-2. That's the abbreviation that you folks use for?
I'm sorry if I hadn't said that. That's the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory.
What other psychological testing did you perform?
So I also performed the clinician-administered PTSD scale, -5, and that -5 links it to the diagnosis for PTSD in our current diagnostic manual, the 5th version. To do that test, you first administer something called the Life Events Checklist. And the Life Events Checklist, both of these tests, by the way, were developed by the National Center for PTSD with the Department of Veterans Affairs. But the Life Events Checklist lists 16 different very stressful life events that people can go through that are often can be associated with developing PTSD. And then it also has a 17th item that you can fill in if you feel like you've been through something really difficult that wasn't included. Now, I like to also add something called the Life Events Checklist 5 interview, which digs a little bit deeper into the person's childhood as well to find out if there's so many different things that can be difficult growing up. And also, it's very important that you have the person determine which of the events they've listed, let's say they have a number of different types of traumas, which one do they feel like was the most traumatic for them? Which one still causes them to feel distressed when they talk about it? And sometimes they can't just identify one. And then that leads to your next decision. So if they have multiple different similar types of events, like seeing combat, then you might use that as the worst one, the multiple similar. So that looks like you describe an anchor, we call it, to do the testing, and we would maybe describe the anchor as the worst of my combat experience, okay? Now, if somebody had multiple different traumas from different times in their life, like childhood abuse, and then went to combat and had some horrible things happen there, you would do the clinician-administered PTSD scale test, the one that comes after. You do one for the childhood event and a separate one for the adulthood event.
Does this clinician-administered PTSD scale have a handy abbreviation?
It does.
Okay.
We'll call it the CAPS-5. That's actually what it goes by.
Okay. How common is the use of the MMPI-2 in your profession?
The MMPI-2 is actually the most commonly used assessment worldwide by mental health professionals and in forensic settings for the court.
Why'd you use it?
I used it for that purpose and for its excellent validity in those settings across genders, across ethnicities, for different reasons. And when I keep saying validity, by the way, what I mean is accuracy, and I'll try to work that in. But then also for detecting the accuracy with which a person reports PTSD.
Okay. Is that scaled in some way?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Does that make use of a scale in some way?
The MMPI-2, do you mean specifically for PTSD?
Yes.
There's actually a combination of scales you want to look for. You would never make the diagnosis just based on one scale alone, or even on the test alone. You'd integrate other data.
How did you administer the MMPI-2 to Ms. Hurd?
I provided her the test on an iPad. She essentially had her own little desk area and then an iPad. She hits start, it provides her with the instructions, and then it gives her 567 statements in order. For each one, she taps true or false.
What did you learn about Ms. Hurd from the results of the MMPI-2?
Quite a bit. I wrote up a 25-page interpretation outline It has numerous scales. So one of the reasons I like this measure so much is that it can tell you so much about multiple different traits and tendencies and mental issues. One of the primary things I learned was that she had a very sophisticated way of minimizing any personal problems. I also learned that she tends to, well, there were a number of characteristics that were consistent with the eventual diagnoses, but some of the primary characteristics, and I'm going to try to condense 25 pages here, were essentially externalization of blame, tending to have a lot of inner hostility that is attempted to be controlled, a tendency to be very self-righteous, but to also deny that self-righteousness and to judge others critically against these sort of high standards for moral value, but also to deny doing that, essentially to claim that one is very non-judgmental and accepting and yet very full of rage, really. And these aren't facts, but her scores essentially correlated, so they were consistent with other people who obtained these scores who have been shown through many studies to have these very specific traits. So externalization of blame, a lot of inner anger and hostility, sometimes that anger among these groups with similar scores, these people might have that anger kind of explode out at times. They tend to be very passive aggressive. They may be self-indulgent, very self-centered. They could use manipulation tactics to try to get their needs met, very needy of attention, acceptance, approval. They tend to distance people who are close to them. Initially, they may seem very charming. They're very socially sophisticated, actually. That was a major component on there. They have a capacity to kind of offer some of their faults, but in a way, but only the ones that people think of lightly and can all relate to. And so they can present as very fair and balanced, but in actuality, they really might be very judgmental of others and unaware of problems in their behavior and their thinking.
So after you provide the examination via the iPad, what do you do?
So once they've completed the test, you can have it scored by the computer immediately. It's a very complex test to interpret, but right away you get a list of what's called critical items. And these are just some, a couple of the items, the statements that are presented that are more clearly symptom-based. And I always follow up with the examinee. Some of these might have to do with suicide. Some of them might have to do with other symptoms that you'd just like to get a little bit more information on, because sometimes an examinee might tell you they're completely fine when you're doing your interview with them and that they have no symptoms. And then when they take the test, it says that they're having trouble sleeping, or they struggle with nausea all the time, or they feel very anxious. And so you want to follow up on that.
Okay. What's a code type?
A code type, let me think of how to explain this very simply. So the main scales, and I keep referring to scales, these are just the main scores that come up on this test. We can refer to them as codes. And when I was saying that Ms. Hurd's scores could be compared to certain groups of people that had been researched before to obtain similar scores, the research has shown that certain people will have certain scores that kind of spike on this, okay? And so all of those traits that I was describing, those are traits that are found in these code types. So it means that score number 2 was high, and score number 6 was high. And so if we have those two scores were both high, then that's a 2-6 code type. And these code types...
What code type was Ms. Hurd?
Ms. Hurd had the clearest code type was 3-6, but then she also had some other code types that were less significant.
What characteristics are associated with a 3-6 code type?
So a 3-6 code type a lot of that anger is expressed in this code type. There can be actually a lot of cruelty, usually with people who are less powerful. Actually, when you see this code type, you want to, if you can, to follow up with subordinates, co-workers, people who may have observed their behavior more closely. The 3-6 code type is very concerned with their image, very attention-seeking, very prone to externalizing blame to a point where it's unclear whether they can even admit to themselves that they do have responsibility in certain areas. A lot of suppressed and denied anger, but the anger is very present, will explode out, and a lot of issues in their close relationships.
How does Ms. Hurd's code type fit in with your overall opinion as to personality disorders?
Well, this might be an appropriate time to describe a little bit about these personality disorders, because I think what you'll hear is that there's a lot of consistency there. So borderline personality disorder is a disorder of stability. It's instability, and it's instability in personal relationships. It's instability in their emotions. It's instability in their behavior, and it's instability in their sense of self and their identity. And that instability is really driven by this underlying terror of abandonment. So one of the key features also of this disorder, and all of it is like pistons of an engine kind of firing off and igniting one another. But when somebody is afraid of being abandoned by their partner or by anybody else in their environment, and they have this disorder, they'll make desperate attempts to prevent that from happening. And those desperate attempts could be physical aggression, it could be threatening, it could be harming themselves. But these are behaviors that are usually very extreme and very concerning to the people around them. The anger is typically what, sadly, it's counteractive, right? So the thing these people fear most is being abandoned, but over time, the anger, the explosive anger that they show when somebody is needing space, or when somebody's really not doing anything wrong, because a lot of times they read into things that they perceive as being a slight to them or being somebody intending to harm them that actually isn't happening. They'll exaggerate it, and they'll explode. They'll react in this heightened manner that is just exhausting for their partners. Oftentimes their partners will try to make them happy at first and really allow themselves to be a punching bag, thinking that they can somehow solve this problem, that somehow they can make this better. And eventually it just overwhelms them. Histrionic personality disorder is very
Before
similar.
we move on to that,
okay.
Are you familiar with the term emotional reactivity?
I am.
What is that?
So emotional reactivity is very common in the diagnosis. So essentially, like I said, there's instability in emotions. People with borderline personality disorder are often misdiagnosed as having bipolar disorder because they can be up and down. They can look very depressed, then they can look very elated, but these changes are happening within a matter of hours. Somebody with bipolar disorder, this is a clinical depression lasting days, weeks, a clinical mania where sometimes they even need to be hospitalized because they're so grandiose. They clear out their bank account and go to Vegas and spend it all. They're acting in some very bizarre ways. With borderline personality disorder, you're having these fluctuating moods constantly. And again, this hypersensitivity to being slighted or feeling offended, really driven by the fear that if you're offended or slighted, if the therapist comes in 2 minutes late, or if somebody shows up to dinner 2 minutes late, that they might be abandoning you. And it's not as if the borderline is considering themselves abandoned in that moment, but they just know that they have this overwhelming emotion, and there are no attempts to control that emotion. There are no attempts to regulate it. So if they're in the middle of the restaurant and they feel offended, they're going to start the fight. People are going to see it, or they might just start crying or break down, but they'll make a lot of accusations, And that reactivity is when you're going to see a lot of this escalation and bizarre behavior. They can react violently. They can react aggressively. They will often physically prevent their partner from trying to leave if their partner wants to get space from all of this intense emotion. And oftentimes they will be abusive to their partners in these situations. Sometimes they'll physically restrain them from leaving and become injured that way. But also, people with borderline personality disorder, it seems to be a predictive factor for women who implement violence against their partner. And one of the most common tactics that they'll use is actually physically assaulting and then getting harmed themselves. But mostly, we call this administrative violence. So essentially, this is saying that they'll make threats using the legal system. So they might say that they are going to file a restraining order or claim abuse, or they might do these things to essentially try to keep their partner from leaving. In the moment, again, they're not consciously thinking, I'm going to keep my partner from leaving right now. They're just thinking, I can't stand this. I hate my partner. They went from idealizing to suddenly devaluing because of the hurt, and they'll do anything to express that big emotion of anger.
Your Honor, may we approach?
All right, yes, sir.
Okay. You indicated you were talking about emotional reactivity. What, if any, emotional reactivity did you observe in your review? And let's do this one at a time.
Okay. So there were a couple indications to me. First, I can sort of think about it with the treatment records. So particularly Dr. Cohen-Connell's, am I getting the name right? I feel like for some reason in my mind I might have just reversed it. But Dr. Cohen's records, I did reverse it. He actually refers to this reactivity quite a bit and to Ms. Heard's temper. And that temper, it's often branded, or being hot-headed, is really characteristic of borderline personality disorder. As is their very charming, personable nature. This is a disorder of contradictions. In Nurse Filati's notes, I thought there was something interesting. She references a night when they're out to dinner, I believe in London, and she provided positive reinforcement to Ms. Heard because Ms. Heard had been disappointed by a mistake made by the server, and it sort of references how previously she might have criticized the server or become upset by that, and that she didn't this time, and so that had been some sort of a step forward. And there was also an indication actually in Dr. Hughes's, Dr. Hughes is a forensic psychologist who had been appointed by Ms. Heard to conduct as an evaluation as well. In Ms. Hughes's interview of Ms. Heard disclosed that she had cut her arm in the past, which is a typical reactive type thing somebody with this diagnosis can do. It's one of the symptoms. And that's sort of all I can think of top of my mind from the treatment records. Moving into some of the declarations or deposition testimony, what struck me was Ms. Raquel Pennington's testimony. She's a former friend of Ms. Heard's, and she told a story about, I suppose they were shopping for Thanksgiving accoutrements, something to prepare for Thanksgiving, and Ms. Heard struck her in the face, sort of out of the blue, which is, I thought was interesting, because that is one of those signs of borderline personality disorder where if a friend or a loved one isn't meeting your needs in that moment, people with borderline personality disorder can be very caring in their relationships as long as their needs are being met. They feel that their needs should be met when they want them met at a specific level, and if they're not, then that anger, that sense of harm causes them to react. So the striking Ms. Pennington, per Ms. Pennington's report in the declaration, or the testimony, I thought was pretty consistent. And then Ms. Heard's own self-descriptions.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you a question about,
Sure.
You indicated Ms. Pennington was a former friend of,
Yes.
of Ms. Heard. Is there a relationship between borderline personality disorder and intimate relationships?
Yes, so the instability definitely translates to their relationships. You'll see relationships start very intensely. People will, somebody with borderline personality disorder perceives the relationship as extremely close. This pattern of idealizing and devaluing is definitely at play. They do this with their lovers and also with their friends. And so this might be the perfect person, their perfect soulmate friend, perfect soulmate partner, and their engagement in the relationship is very alluring, very charming to the other person. And so initially everything seems great. But what occurs is that reality sets in. People are not perfect, even when we have a lot in common with them. Whereas most of us can accept somebody as a whole, somebody who has a little bit of flaws, and still think this is my great friend who always constantly running late for dinner. The person with borderline personality disorder, things are in these extremes, this black and white, we call it splitting. And so that person goes from being idealized, the perfect person, to dumpster. They are totally devalued. They are the worst friend. They don't care anything about me. I have better people around. And then there will be a repair, because the person with this disorder does feel remorseful after they have these reactions, angry, tell their friend off. But over time, it wears away at these relationships. And so what you'll usually see is many, many transitions in their friendships over the years, people who have sort of fallen by the wayside, who were really very close-knit at one time, and then, but there's not a lot of consistency in the long term. You'll also see that with their intimate relationships, many, many relationships, but none that are particularly long-term.
How does borderline personality disorder relate to identity issues?
So again, that instability also travels toward identity. And when I was describing personality earlier, I was talking a little bit about those traits we have that help us know who we are. When you have borderline personality disorder, that actually is not something you understand. So people with this disorder actually take on the identity of the people they're spending time with because it's comforting. It's very uncomfortable to not know who you are. Some people with this disorder will describe a feeling of emptiness when they feel like they've been abandoned because now they don't know who they are in the world. And so when somebody with this disorder is going through that initial enmeshment phase with new people and they're idealizing them, they often will take on the identities of those people. So they may mimic them in a lot of ways. They might mimic the way they dress, their interests, the way they talk. And for this reason, the people around somebody with this disorder kind of from the outside may feel like, wait, I thought you were this way, now you're advocating for this, and this is your new main interest in life, or the thing you're throwing yourself into all completely. Music tastes might change, hobbies will change, the way they dress.
Okay. In addition to borderline personality disorder, I understand that you diagnosed another personality disorder. What's that?
So histrionic personality disorder, and these are really two sides of the same coin. They belong to the same cluster. We call these clusters. It's a way to organize personality disorders in that DSM. And this cluster is described as the personality disorders that are dramatic, erratic, and emotional. Okay, so unpredictable, but really having to do with emotions and relationships. They're very similar. Whereas I was saying that borderline personality disorder, a lot of the key features that you're going to notice are instability. When it comes to histrionic, a lot of the key features are going to be drama and shallowness. Similarly, with borderline personality disorder, there's this underlying drive of avoiding abandonment. With histrionic personality disorder, that underlying drive is to always be the center of attention. Because if you don't have that attention on you, it feels similarly to borderline personality disorder. You feel pretty empty, like you don't have that sense of being or of value, okay? So whereas borderline personality disorder might have more of the visible reactivity if somebody seems to be leaving, with histrionic personality disorder, what you're going to see is extreme discomfort with not being the center of attention, extreme efforts to be the center of attention, and when they feel that they're not the center of attention, you will see some strange things, making up stories to try to get attention, often taking on a victim or princess role. Those two roles in particular are pretty consistent. Seeking caretaking. Borderline personality disorder is similar because with borderline personality disorder, these shifts of identity and the splitting, you might see somebody go from being, in the DSM it describes it as a needy supplicant of help, seeking the perfect caretaker, to suddenly being the avenger against injustice or thinking that their partner is a terrible person. With histrionic, what you'll see is somebody who wants to be the center of attention, has sort of that impressionistic speech, very flowery, very enthusiastic, but nothing's really being said. The moment your attention wears away, because they're so demanding for attention, that's when they might take the victim role or the princess role and even make up stories. Sometimes those stories are to bolster the victim role. Sometimes those stories are just to make them look more interesting or accomplished in their mind so that they can get respect and attention that way.
Is there a relation between histrionic personality disorder and attractiveness?
There is, strangely, and this is always one of the trickiest things to talk about. How is that a symptom? But characteristically, people with this disorder are very, very interested in looks, but more importantly, they utilize their looks to get that attention, to get that respect that they're seeking. And so this type of a personality might be flirtatious with everybody. Characteristically, they actually couldn't even be subtly, and when I say flirtatious, I'm not talking overtly sexy, but kind of inappropriately flattering. Sometimes they act in a kind of a girlish way to be cute and to engender attention. And this will even occur in their therapy relationships as a way to sort of avoid getting negative feedback or criticism. Oftentimes they'll bring the therapist gifts or be distracting if they engage in therapy because they just don't want any criticism. They want the therapist to like them.
Does the intelligence of the affected person bear on the manner in which these disorders present?
Excuse me, I choked a little at my water. Yes, and I think one way to think about it that's probably a little more accurate than just intelligence is, in psychology, we would describe this more as sophistication. So street smarts, so to speak. The way, for instance, I've had many clients who have borderline personality disorder who are messy and really clearly suffering, and they might be difficult and all over the place and yell at you in the middle of a session, but it's so, it's not tailored. It's so much easier to work with because of that just openness and rawness of it, genuineness. sometimes you'll have a more sophisticated presentation. There are 9 symptoms and only 5 have to be met. So there are a lot of different combinations and different ways it can present. And sometimes you'll have more of a petulant version of this, where it really shows when you push the button and you're kind of, whoa, what was that? So somebody who's really productive, high functioning, successful, and you get to know them and you think they're fantastic because they're so interested in you too. And you might not realize it, but they're mimicking you perfectly. So you're really just kind of falling in love with this new friend who is being you. But then all of a sudden, you say something that they think is offensive, and you can't, even in your wildest thoughts, understand how that could have offended somebody, but their reaction is so strong that you kind of buy into it. Gosh, maybe I did say something offensive, and you feel bad about it. So that sophisticated version, they can be a little bit more calculated in the way they present. They tend to kind of hit you where it hurts a little bit more, and they can be actually very, very destructive.
What conclusions were you able to draw about Ms. Heard's sophistication from her testing?
Well, from her testing and from her presentation, she was very likable, but her testing in particular showed that she approached it in a manner that, remember I told you about those scales that are pretty neat. She approached it in a manner that very clearly minimized any psychological dysfunction, not just that, but really presented herself as free of any problems. And she did so in a way that was very, very sophisticated, not obvious, by responding to questions that most people might not notice were trying to detect that.
How did you determine that?
So that's based on a particular scale on the MMPI-2 that is designed specifically to detect a type of responding that's a little bit more clever, a little bit more sophisticated, minimizing problems in a way that most lay people probably wouldn't understand, and even providers, very difficult to detect.
You mentioned that one of the characteristics of borderline personality disorder is emotional reactivity. How might that present in an intimate relationship?
So I think it probably presents mostly, or you'd see the bulk of it in intimate relationships because of that regular interaction and the desire for your partner to meet all of your needs, to be the perfect caretaker. Also that the hallmark of the disorder with the splitting, so idealizing, devaluing, and the perceiving of all sorts of neutral events as somehow demeaning or disrespectful. It's regular escalations of anger, frustrated complaints, criticisms of your partner. But because the person with borderline personality disorder, first of all, they're more sensitive to things, they feel distress more strongly, and then that distress lasts longer. So these types of blow-ups go on forever, and they're very cyclic. It feels like you just can't get a resolution, and eventually the partner will try to leave, will want to leave to take a break. It wears them down, and that's when the borderline might explode and act very aggressively or violently to try to prevent them from leaving.
In addition to diagnosing Ms. Heard with these 2 personality disorders, did you form another opinion about Ms. Heard's mental status?
Yes, so go ahead.
If the answer to that is yes, I'm going to now ask
you,
what was that?
Yes, I did.
Okay, what is it?
So in addition to looking for Ms. Heard's general mental status, any psychological issues that were present, I very specifically was assessing to determine whether post-traumatic stress disorder was present, and it was not.
How do you know that?
So first of all, from multiple information sources, right? So I was integrating the interview, my review of the data, the case records, other people's testimony, her treatment records, And then I also conducted, in addition to the MMPI-2 and looking at that data, I also conducted the clinician-administered PTSD scale, the CAPS-5, which is the gold standard PTSD assessment developed by the National Center for PTSD, shown to be valid, accurate for use not just with service members, but also with civilians, men, women, all genders, and also all ethnicities, and then also specifically for use in a courtroom setting.
How do you conduct the CAPS-5?
So the CAPS-5 is a standard interview. What that means is that it's an interview with very clear questions that are scripted, and you ask those same questions every time you test a person. So because you're doing that, you're actually taking something that would typically be kind of subjective, an interview with somebody, and you're making it more objective. When you ask those same questions in the same way every time somebody's assessed with this, now you can apply a scoring protocol and actually score their responses.
Okay. As a result of applying those protocols, what did you conclude?
Ms. Heard did not have PTSD, and there were also pretty significant indications that she was grossly exaggerating symptoms of PTSD when asked about them.
How did you make that latter conclusion?
So one of the strengths of this test, as I mentioned, the important thing about any test used when you're doing an evaluation in forensics is to make sure that the person is responding accurately. And this test does that by not just asking people whether they have a symptom, but asking follow-up questions that draw out very detailed accounts of every single symptom of PTSD. And when you're really familiar with this disorder, which you need to be to administer this test, there are nuances in the way a person will describe their symptoms that have been shown repeatedly to indicate exaggeration or faking. There are also indications when somebody is clearly giving you a genuine response.
Okay. What, if any, symptoms of PTSD did you observe in Ms. Heard?
So there are 20 kind of core symptoms that somebody can manifest with PTSD. You don't have to have all of them. Ms. Heard initially said that she had, in the first question, you say, do you ever have this, before you get to the more nuanced follow-up questions. When I asked that first question on each item, she initially said, yes, I have that, to 19 of the 20 symptoms. That's not typical even of somebody with the most disabling form of PTSD. When we eventually sort of dialed it down, she had 3 remaining symptoms. And having symptoms of any disorder is common for all of us. Some of us struggle with sleep. Some of us get anxious. It could be several different disorders. It could just be that you have this struggle in your life. But she had 3 specific symptoms that I scored as present. Off the top of my head, I might miss one, but one was sleep disturbance. So she reported that she has frequent nightmares. Another one was that she said that she tends to have a startle response. So if she gets startled or surprised, she tends to stay in sort of a hyper startle mode for quite a while. And that's consistent with a couple of things. It can be consistent with PTSD if other criteria are met. It's also consistent with childhood complex trauma, which is something that can occur when your brain is forming. If you constantly feel unsafe, if your parents are abusive, or if they're not present, if you're neglected, you can develop certain physiological responses that can stay for a long time in your life. So I noted that seemed like a very genuine, accurate account where she stays in the state of kind of hyper arousal, has a hard time calming down if she gets surprised.
You mentioned nightmares as well.
Yes.
Did she recount for you the nature of the nightmares?
So they were vague. She indicated that she has recurrent nightmares and that she feels as though she's being held down. And there was some conflict in that account because even though that could be a PTSD symptom, it is fairly vague, but I still scored it as present. And in her initial treatment with with Dr. Bonnie Jacobs, which I believe started before she began dating Mr. Depp, she had indicated to Dr. Jacobs, according to Dr. Jacobs's notes, that she was having repetitive nightmares back then and that they were related to her childhood trauma. And so that came up several times in the notes. Dr. Jacobs kept mentioning that.
Thank you. What is feigning?
Feigning is essentially faking or exaggerating symptoms that aren't present.
Does the CAPS-5 control for that?
It doesn't necessarily control for it. It can expose it by drawing out.
How does that work?
Because you're not just simply handing the person a checklist that says, here are all the symptoms of PTSD. Why don't just check off the ones you have, which clearly if you're trying to look like you have PTSD, you would just check them all. The CAPS-5, because it requires them to describe in detail how they experience the symptom, where it shows up, what it looks like, what sort of examples they can give you, how many times it's happened in the last couple weeks, how many times it's happened in the last month. By the end of each symptom, you've gotten a very good picture of a couple things. One, does it meet the definition of the symptom? Are they getting it right? Is this actually the symptom, or are they kind of confusing this with something else? Number two, are they giving you very vague accounts? Are they giving you kind of a stereotyped idea of what the symptom is based on media or movies or something that actually is completely different from genuine experiences of this symptom? Or are they giving you a very genuine, heartfelt, sometimes minimizing, but it's ticking all the boxes. Their mannerisms while they're describing it, the actual very specific, very nuanced, symbolic ways they're describing it. A lot of times it smells, it sounds. That all appears in genuine accounts, and it's something that people really get wrong when they're feigning.
All right. In addition to your conclusion that Ms. Heard does not have PTSD, did you make a conclusion with respect to her symptoms?
Yes, actually I did. So, just because somebody doesn't have PTSD doesn't mean that they weren't harmed psychologically by whatever is being alleged. In this case, Ms. Heard is alleging that she was psychologically harmed and that she suffered PTSD because of abuse that she alleges occurred by Mr. Depp. So the MMPI-2 is helpful because it shows you kind of everything, any other symptoms. And then in Ms. Heard's own self-report and her prior treatment records, I knew that she had reported to me that she had had some other symptoms. So now what becomes really important is determining, and let me clarify one thing here, not so much a diagnosis, but did she start to experience symptoms during the relationship and after? Did they worsen after? Or could these types of symptoms or reports be explained by other factors? A, by feigning, B, by pre-existing conditions, or C, by other stressful life events that might have occurred. So the main symptoms that I was looking at didn't meet criteria for PTSD, right? There was also substantial evidence of this sort of emotional dysregulation, emotional disorganization, the shallowness, the dramatic affect. Now, when you have a lot of childhood trauma, you can actually have some similar type presentation in adulthood. There are some differences though, but also that's not something that would have occurred after this relationship. So now I was looking at, are there indications that these types of things that she's described, this transient anxiety, the issues with sleep, were these there prior? And sure enough, Ms. Heard, in her own self-report, stated to me that when she first got to LA, she was seeking treatment for, in her words, blanket anxiety and depression. She also reported that she was taking medications. In general, none of them were helpful. That's actually very typical of borderline personality disorder. Medications typically aren't very helpful for somebody with the disorder. They really need an intensive, lifelong type of therapy, which is not necessarily as relevant to this. But interestingly also, people with borderline personality disorder often respond really positively to stimulant medications that are given for ADD or ADHD. And in one of Nurse Filati's notes, she reported that Ms. Hurd told her that none of the medications were working for her except for one Provigil, which is often prescribed as a stimulant medication. And I just thought that was interesting and sort of consistent with more of these lifelong personality disorders that aren't necessarily caused by a harm by any allegations, but have been there and will remain there typically. The other issue, so the anxiety, she had already indicated that had been there prior, but the form of the anxiety. So looking at Dr. Hughes's testing and then also looking at the scores on the MMPI, when you look at all these little combinations of the scores, you can actually learn a lot about, is the anxiety related to an event, or is this more a person who tends to be an anxious person regardless of what's going on in their life? And somebody might describe them as a worrywart. And the scores, the little combination of scores that she obtained actually indicated that it was the latter, that her anxiety tends to be separate from events and more just kind of a constant, and it comes and goes, but it's more of a trait.
I have no further questions for this witness.
All right. Maybe why don't we go ahead and, Ms. Breda, go ahead and have our lunch break. It might be a good idea to break it up there. Okay, I know. I can see you jumping up. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and take our lunch recess. Just again, do not do any outside research and don't discuss the case with anybody, okay? We'll have you back here.
Yeah, she lost me like 2 hours ago. She was way too long-winded. Very smart, very intelligent, just way long-winded. Zoned her out a while ago. Lunch is the post office. I got to get out these boxes. I have like five or six orders I got to bring to the post office. One of them is Tammy's. Tammy's poor package. While I have a chance while I'm live, speaking of packages, Just a Mom, I want to thank you so much. Dayton was so excited. And the butterflies, so Just a Mom sent me these really nice butterfly earrings. I don't know if she knows my thing with butterflies, and that's why she sent them, if it was random that she just liked them. So the fact that she sent me butterfly earrings made me cry, because now I'm going to cry again, because I'm a big wussy. And as you guys know, someone told me a long time ago that butterflies represent someone that died. So the fact that she sent these butterflies really was like heartfelt. And if she didn't send them for that reason, well, she sent them anyway. And she sent Dayton a gift card. He was so excited. He couldn't believe it. And, a beautiful card. She sent us both beautiful cards. So I just want to give a big shout out to Just a Mom for that. Thank you so much. Dayton's been bugging me to get a Wi-Fi extender. I said, well, Dayton, now you have money for a Wi-Fi extender. He's like, no. And I said, yeah. He's like, no, that's not what I'm using this for. I said, oh, yes, you are. So, kids, I'm telling you, they think mom's money just grows on trees and they can do whatever they want with their money. So, yeah, typical kid. Yeah, so like I said, I don't know if the butterflies was just her, like on a whim, like she didn't know, or if she actually knew the thing with butterflies in me. So I don't know. It was very strange, but I opened them and I cried. So yeah, like I said, if it was a random thing, that's impressive. So big shout out to her. But yeah, so I heard last night, I was listening to something and they were talking about kids of divorced parents. And they were saying that many kids feel like they are, that every time their parents look at them, all they keep thinking is, they're a product of failure. That's all they're ever known as, a product of failure. I was like, wow. I never even thought of that. And I don't think the twins would feel like that because it's just not them and they never grew up with their dad. But I can see Dayton saying something like that. I really could. Just a Mom Mazio is who it is. yeah. I don't see her in here, but I just wanted to give her a shout out. I'm going to have Dayton thank her too. If the parents view it as a failure. I'm just saying, like, you say so many things when you're in a heated argument or in a heated debate or when you're fighting in court, anything, you always say, like, you know, things that hurt. Yeah, I was told a long time ago, Supergirl, that a butterfly, now I know Ash274, if she's listening, she's going to laugh because she never believed me. But somebody told me that a butterfly, if you see a butterfly, it represents someone that died. And there was this butterfly when I first moved to Alabama that landed on an ashtray. It was like right on top of a cigarette. And I was like, oh my God, it's my dad. That is my dad telling me that this was a good move and everything was going to be okay. So that's old though. I said that a long time ago. And the fact that she sent me butterfly earrings, I was like, wow. It really blew my mind. And it hit me hard. I was like, oh my God, I wonder if she knows my thing with butterflies. I saw ladybug's not a butterfly. No, I'm telling you, this butterfly landed right on top of a cigarette. I said, how the hell would a butterfly land on top of a cigarette? The most beautiful color finch landed on her and stayed a while. I'm telling you. And there's no way a butterfly would stay on top of a cigarette. So that's why I know it had to be my dad. It just had to be. And Ash274 was left. Whoop. Hey, Tammy. Yes, I am heading to the post office. I didn't open it, by the way. I can't. It's wrapped so perfectly, I just stuck another label on it. But it's coming to you. I'm going to the post office in a minute. 1 to 3 days, you will receive it. I do have a thing for butterflies. You should make a butterfly candle. I could. So, by the way, speaking of candles, this new website is going to take me a while. So, I'm still going to use the other one. It's just my Instagram. You guys will see more stuff. But yeah, it's going to take me a while. I didn't realize how intricate I wanted it and how intricate I'm making it. And it'll be fantastic when it's done. But yeah, it's going to take me a while. A while. Probably like maybe June 1st. That long. And Mom's coming the 19th of May. So, all right. I'm going to cut out of here, though, because I have to go to the post office. I will see you guys for second half as soon as we get back. I haven't made any butterfly candles. Not yet. I don't even know what scent I would use, but no, I haven't made them yet. But I will. I have lots of things in my mind. I just have to put it on display. And I found other ways to do the pictures. So if you want to see if your order's ready or order's going out, you definitely check Instagram. That's where you'll see everything. But let me get to the post office. I got to drop all these packages off, and I'll see you guys when I get back. So I'll see you guys in about 30 minutes or so. All right? Peace.